Sign it." The voice was low, smooth, devoid of warmth. "And if I refuse, then your father dies before the sun rises." The pen was slammed onto the table, and the entire Thornwood pack turns to ash. "It is your choice. Ava, you are a monster. I am the only monster that can save you." The sterile scent of antiseptic and fading lilies choked the air inside the private hospital room. It was a smell that Ava Thornwood had come to associate with despair. Outside, the storm battered the glass of the fourth-floor window, masking the labored, rattling breaths of the man lying in the bed. Marcus Thornwood, once the proud alpha of the Thornwood pack, looked small beneath the thin white sheets. His skin was gray, his strength siphoned away by a sickness that no human doctor could diagnose and no pack healer could cure. Ava stood by the window, her reflection ghost-like against the dark glass. She pressed her forehead against the cold pane. At 24, she was supposed to be preparing to take over the family business, to live a life of art and freedom. Instead, she was watching her world crumble. The pack was bankrupt. Her father was dying, and the wolves at the border were getting hungry. The heavy oak door creaked open. Ava didn't turn around immediately. She assumed it was the nurse coming to change the IV drip. "Leave it on the table, please," Ava whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I am not here to deliver medicine, Miss Thornwood." The voice was not the nurse's. It was a baritone rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards, deep and rich like dark chocolate, yet edged with the sharpness of a blade. Ava spun around, her breath hitched in her throat. Dominic Kane stood in the doorway. He was a legend in their world, a nightmare whispered to pups to make them behave, the alpha of the Blackstone pack. He was taller than any man had a right to be, filling the doorframe with an expanse of broad shoulders clad in an impeccable, charcoal gray suit. His hair was black as a raven's wing, swept back from a face that looked as though it had been carved from marble by a cruel god. High cheekbones, a sharp jawline, and eyes, God. Those eyes, they were the color of steel, cold and impenetrable. "Alpha Kane," Ava managed to say, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "What are you doing here?" Dominic stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a definitive click. The air in the room instantly grew heavier, charged with the sheer potency of his aura. Even though Ava was human, or mostly human, as she had always been told, she could feel the static electricity of his power prickling her skin. "Your father called for me," Dominic said, his gaze sweeping over her. He didn't look at her face. He looked at her throat, then her waist, then her hands. It felt like a physical touch, a phantom caress that made her shiver. "My father is unconscious," Ava argued, stepping between the intruder and the bed. "He hasn't spoken in 2 days." Dominic moved. He didn't walk. He prowled. In 2 strides, he crossed the room and stood before her. He was close, too close. Ava could smell him, a heady, intoxicating mix of rain, cedarwood, and something feral, like musk and danger. "He called me before he lost consciousness," Dominic corrected. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "He knew the end was coming. He knew the vultures were circling your territory. He asked for a lifeline." Dominic held the envelope out. Ava hesitated, her fingers trembling as she took it. Their fingers brushed. A jolt of heat, sharp and electric, shot up her arm. Ava gasped, nearly dropping the papers. She looked up, startled, and saw Dominic's eyes narrow. For a split second, the steel gray flashed with a predatory gold. "Read it," he commanded. Ava opened the envelope. It was a legal document, a contract. Merger of assets and territories between Blackstone and Thornwood. She scanned the legalese, her confusion growing with every paragraph. It wasn't just a merger, it was a takeover. Blackstone would absorb their debts, pay for the best specialists for Marcus, and protect their borders. But the price... Her eyes fell on Clause 4. The alliance shall be sealed through a binding union of marriage between Alpha Dominic Kane and Ava Thornwood. The paper shook in her hands. Marriage? She choked out. You want to marry me? I don't want to do anything, Dominic said, his voice devoid of emotion. This is a transaction. Your father needs money and protection. I need the Thornwood territory to secure my southern border. A marriage is the quickest way to legitimize the claim without a war. I'm not a piece of land to be traded, Ava snapped, anger momentarily overriding her fear. She threw the papers onto the small table. I won't do it. Dominic remained perfectly still. He radiated a terrifying calmness. Then look at your father, Ava. She looked. Marcus wheezed, his chest rising with agonizing slowness. Without my specialists. He has 3 days, maybe 4, Dominic stated coldly. Without my money. This hospital will discharge him tomorrow. Without my warriors. The rogue wolves patrolling your borders will slaughter your remaining pack members before the next full moon. He took a step closer, invading her personal space. He loomed over her, a wall of heat and muscle. He reached out, his large hand capturing her chin. His fingers were rough, calloused, yet his grip was surprisingly gentle. He tilted her face up, forcing her to meet his gaze. Is your pride worth his life? He asked softly. Ava stared into his eyes. There was no pity there, only calculation. And something else, a hunger she couldn't place. Why me? She whispered. There are dozens of she-wolves in your own pack who would kill to be your Luna. Why a human from a failing pack? Dominic's thumb brushed against her lower lip, a slow, deliberate movement that sent a shockwave of confusing arousal straight to her core. He was threatening her, blackmailing her, yet her body was betraying her, responding to his proximity. Because, Dominic murmured, leaning down until his lips were inches from her ear, you are convenient, and you are desperate, and I do not want a real wife. I want a figurehead. Ava pulled away, her breath coming in short gasps. She grabbed the contract again, looking for a loophole. Anything. That was when she saw it. Clause 12, the groom retains full authority over the bride regarding all matters concerning her true lineage and biological nature. Ava frowned. What does this mean, Clause 12? My true lineage? I'm Marcus Thornwood's daughter. Dominic's expression didn't change, but the air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. Standard legal jargon for mixed pack treaties. It is irrelevant. It doesn't feel irrelevant, Ava muttered. Suddenly, a memory flashed in her mind. Her mother, Elena, pale and dying in a similar hospital bed 14 years ago. You aren't like the other children. Ava, you have to hide. Don't let them see. Don't let them know what you are. Ava had never understood what her mother meant. She couldn't shift. She didn't have enhanced speed or strength. She was just Ava. Tick-tock, Ava, Dominic said, checking his expensive wristwatch. I have a board meeting in an hour. Sign the papers, and the medical team enters immediately. Refuse, and I walk away. Ava looked at her father. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't have a choice. She never really had a choice. Fine, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'll do it. Dominic produced a fountain pen from his pocket. It looked like pure silver. He uncapped it and held it out to her. Good girl. The praise was patronizing, yet the dark timbre of his voice made her knees weak. She took the pen. Her hand shook violently as she scratched her signature on the dotted line. It felt less like a wedding contract and more like a death sentence. Dominic took the papers back instantly, inspecting the signature. A satisfied smirk touched his lips, transforming his face from statuesque beauty to something dangerous and devilish. The wedding is in 3 days, he announced, pocketing the contract. Pack your things. My driver will collect you in the morning. 3 days, Ava gasped. But my father. My doctors will handle your father. Your place is at Blackstone Manor now. Dominic turned to leave. Wait, Ava called out. He paused at the door, glancing back over his shoulder. People say your first wife, Isabella. Ava swallowed hard, trying to find the courage. They say she died because the position of Luna was too much for her. They say you are cursed. Dominic turned fully to face her. The shadows in the room seemed to cling to him. For a moment, his mask slipped, revealing a well of agony so deep it took Ava's breath away, but it was gone in a blink, replaced by that icy indifference. People say many things, Ava, he said quietly, but you should know one thing about the role you just accepted. What is that? Welcome to hell, little wife. He walked out, leaving Ava alone in the silence, the smell of his cedar cologne lingering in the air like a warning. She looked down at her hands. They were still trembling, but deep inside her chest, beneath the fear and the grief, something strange was happening. A low, thrumming hum, like a distant engine waking up. She didn't know it then, but the ink on the page had done more than sell her freedom. It had started a countdown. Dominic Kane knew exactly what she was, and he had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. 3 days later, Ava found herself standing at the altar of a private chapel on the grounds of Blackstone Manor. If she had ever dreamed of her wedding day, it had involved sunlight, wildflowers, and a groom who looked at her with love. Instead, the sky outside the high Gothic windows was a bruised purple, threatening a storm. The chapel was cold, built of gray stone that seemed to suck the warmth right out of her bones. And the groom... Dominic stood beside her, dressed in a black tuxedo that fit his muscular frame like a second skin. He looked devastatingly handsome, in the way a lethal weapon is beautiful. He hadn't looked at her once since she walked down the aisle. Ava adjusted the lace of her long sleeves. The dress was stunning, a vintage masterpiece of ivory silk and lace that Dominic had sent for her. It fit perfectly, too perfectly, as if he knew her measurements down to the millimeter, but the high neck felt like a chokehold. The officiant, a nervous-looking man from the Werewolf Council, droned on about duty and pack unity. Ava barely heard him. She could feel the eyes of the congregation boring into her back. The Blackstone pack was powerful, wealthy, and elite. The pews were filled with people wearing designer clothes and expressions of open hostility. They knew she was from a failing pack. They knew this was a business deal. Do you, Dominic Kane, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife and Luna? Dominic turned his head slowly. For the first time that day, his eyes locked onto hers. The intensity was physical. It felt like a weight pressing against her chest. I do, he said. His voice was deep, resonating through the stone chapel. It wasn't a vow of love. It was a vow of possession. And do you, Ava Thornwood? Ava swallowed the lump in her throat. She thought of her father, currently in a private clinic, receiving the best care money could buy. She thought of the check Dominic had already deposited into the Thornwood accounts. I do, she whispered. You may kiss the bride. The air in the chapel seemed to vanish. Ava froze. She hadn't thought about this part. Dominic moved with predatory grace. He stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. He towered over her, his large hand coming up to cup the side of her face. His skin was hot, calloused, and rough against her smooth cheek. His thumb traced her jawline, sending shivers cascading down her spine. He lowered his head. Ava squeezed her eyes shut, bracing herself. His lips met hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was hard, demanding, and thorough. His mouth moved over hers with an expertise that made her knees buckle. Ava gasped, and he used the opportunity to deepen the kiss, his tongue sweeping into her mouth, tasting her. For a terrifying second, Ava forgot where she was. She forgot the contract. She forgot the hostility in the room. Her hands instinctively rose to clutch the lapels of his jacket, heat pooled in her belly, liquid and fiery. She found herself pressing closer to him, her body betraying her mind, seeking his warmth. Dominic groaned low in his throat, a sound that vibrated against her lips. His arm tightened around her waist, pulling her flush against his hard body. Then, just as abruptly as it began, he pulled away. Ava stood there, breathless, her lips swollen and tingling. She opened her eyes to find Dominic looking down at her. His pupils were blown wide, his irises swimming with gold flecks. He looked shaken. But he blinked, and the mask was back. He turned to the crowd, his face impassive. "I present to you Luna Ava Kane." There was polite applause, but it was thin. The reception was held in the great hall of the manor. It was a lavish affair, with crystal chandeliers and tables laden with gourmet food, but the atmosphere was as chilly as the grave. Ava stood by the refreshments, clutching a glass of champagne she didn't intend to drink. Dominic had disappeared the moment they entered the hall, swallowed by a group of elders. "You don't look like much." Ava turned to see a stunning woman standing behind her. She had fiery red hair, dangerous curves, and eyes that held naked malice. "Excuse me?" Ava asked. "I'm Chloe Bennett," the woman said, looking Ava up and down with a sneer. "Beta female, and frankly, you're a disappointment. I expected Orn." Ava straightened her spine. "I'm sorry to disappoint you, Chloe, but I'm here now." "For how long?" Chloe took a sip of her wine, her eyes narrowing. "You're standing in her spot, you know Isabella. She was a true Luna. Powerful, beautiful. She died protecting this pack." Ava felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty hall. "I'm not trying to replace her." "Good," Chloe hissed, stepping closer. "Because you couldn't. Dominic doesn't love you. He bought you. You're just a warm body to keep his bed occupied until he finds a way to bring her back." "That's enough, Chloe." Dominic's voice cut through the noise of the party like a whip crack. He appeared at Ava's side, his presence looming and dark. He didn't look at Ava, he glared at Chloe with lethal intensity. "Alpha," Chloe said, her voice softening into something syrupy. "I was just welcoming the new Luna." "You were insulting my wife," Dominic growled. The air around him shimmered with suppressed aggression. "Walk away. Chloe, before I forget, you are my Beta's daughter." Chloe paled. She shot one last hateful look at Ava before retreating into the crowd. Ava let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "Thank you." Dominic finally looked at her. His jaw was tight. "Do not thank me. Weakness is not tolerated in Blackstone. If she bites, you bite back. You are the Luna now. Act like it." His words stung, but before Ava could retort, he grabbed her hand. "Come, the festivities are over." "Already?" Ava asked, stumbling as he pulled her toward the grand staircase. "But the guests?" "I don't care about the guests." Dominic led her up the winding stone staircase, past the gallery of portraits of grim-faced ancestors, and down a long, dimly lit corridor in the east wing. Ava's heart began to race. The wedding night. She knew it was coming, but the reality of it was crashing down on her. Was he going to demand his rights? Was this part of the contract too? He stopped in front of a heavy wooden door at the very end of the hall. It was far away from the main master suite where she knew Dominic slept. He unlocked the door and pushed it open. "This is your room," he said. Ava blinked. "My room?" "You will sleep here," Dominic stated, his voice flat. "I sleep in the west wing. You are not to come to my quarters unless summoned. You are not to leave this wing at night." Ava felt a wave of relief wash over her, followed quickly by confusion. "We aren't staying together." Dominic looked at her, his eyes unreadable. For a moment, his gaze dropped to her lips, and she saw a flash of that same hunger from the chapel, but he clenched his fists and looked away. "No, good night, Ava." He turned and walked away, his stride long and hurried, as if he couldn't get away from her fast enough. Ava watched him go until he disappeared around the corner. Then, She stepped into the room and closed the door. She flicked on the light switch. The room was spacious, but it was strange. It wasn't decorated like a guest room. It smelled of lavender and old paper. There was a large 4-poster bed, but in the corner, there was a rocking chair, and on the shelves. Ava walked over to the bookshelf. It was filled with children's books, old ones, Grimm's fairy tales, The Velveteen Rabbit. She moved to the vanity table. It was covered in a layer of dust. Tucked into the corner of the mirror was a photograph. The edges were curled and yellowed with age. Ava picked it up. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a photo of 2 children playing in a garden. One was a boy, tall and brooding, even then Dominic. The other was a little girl with wild black hair and bright, curious eyes. She was laughing, holding a flower up to the boy. Ava's hand shook. She knew that smile. She knew that face. It was her. She stared at the photo, her mind spinning. She was 5 years old in this picture, but she had never met Dominic Kane until 3 days ago. She had grown up in the Thornwood territory. She had never been to Blackstone Manor. Or so she thought. She flipped the photo over. On the back, in faded handwriting, were the words, Dominic and Ava, the promise. Ava dropped the photo. It fluttered to the floor like a dead leaf. Why did Dominic have a picture of her as a child? Why was she in his house? And why did this room feel so terrifyingly familiar? Like a memory she had locked away in the deepest dark of her mind. She rushed to the door, intending to demand answers, but the handle wouldn't turn. Locked. Panic rose in her throat. She banged on the wood. Dominic, Dominic, open the door. Silence answered her. Ava slid down to the floor, her wedding dress pulling around her like a cloud of white silk. She wasn't just a wife. She wasn't just a business partner. She was a piece of a puzzle she didn't know she was playing, and as the moon rose high outside the window, casting long, claw-like shadows across the floor, Ava realized that the monster she had married wasn't a stranger at all. He was a ghost from a past she had forgotten, and he had brought her here to make her remember. The first week at Blackstone Manor passed in a blur of gray stone and silence. Ava felt less like a bride and more like a prisoner in a gilded cage. The house was a labyrinth of dark corridors, drafty halls, and locked doors. Dominic was a ghost, leaving before she woke and returning long after the moon had risen. He was avoiding her. She knew it. The staff knew it. And the whispering portraits on the walls seemed to know it too. But Ava wasn't the type to sit and rot. On the morning of the 7th day, the rain finally stopped, replaced by a thick, cloying fog that rolled off the moors and swallowed the grounds. Ava took the opportunity to explore the West Wing, the area Dominic had explicitly forbidden her from entering. She moved silently across the plush Persian runners, her heart thumping a jagged rhythm against her ribs. The house staff were busy in the kitchens preparing for the Alpha's lunch, giving her a window of opportunity. She turned a corner and nearly collided with a solid wall of chest. Ava gasped, stumbling back, but a hand shot out to steady her. It wasn't Dominic. The grip was firm but lacked that crushing, possessive intensity. Easy there, Luna, a warm voice chuckled. Ava looked up to see Ryan Fletcher, the beta male she had met briefly at the wedding. He had sandy blonde hair, laugh lines around his eyes, and a kindness to his face that was rare in this house. Ryan, Ava breathed, smoothing her sweater, you startled me. And you are somewhere you shouldn't be, Ryan noted, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He glanced down the hallway toward a set of double mahogany doors. Dominic will skin us both if he finds you here. I'm his wife, not his pet, Ava said, a flash of defiance sparking in her chest. I have a right to know where I live. Why is this hallway so quiet? Why is that room locked? She pointed to the double doors. Ryan's smile faded. He looked over his shoulder, checking for eavesdroppers. That was Isabella's room. No one has been inside since the accident. The accident, Ava repeated, stepping closer to him. Everyone talks about it, but no one says what happened. Please, Ryan, if I'm going to survive here, I need to know. Ryan hesitated, scrubbing a hand over his jaw. He looked at Ava, really looked at her, and seemed to come to a decision. 2 years ago, he murmured. Isabella received a phone call. She was frantic. She took the car, didn't wait for her guards. She was driving toward the Thornwood border. It was raining, like it always is. She lost control on the cliff road. Ava felt the blood drain from her face. The Thornwood border, why was she going to my pack? We don't know, Ryan sighed. Dominic. He changed that night. The wolf in him took over. He blames himself. He thinks if he had been with her, she'd still be here. I need to see inside, Ava said, the impulse sudden and overwhelming. Ava, no. Please, just for a minute. Ryan bit his lip, then sighed. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a master key ring. 5 minutes, if anyone asks. I was never here. He unlocked the door, the mechanism groaning with disuse, and pushed it open. Ava slipped inside, and Ryan pulled the door shut, leaving her alone in the gloom. The room smelled of stale air and preserved grief. Heavy velvet curtains blocked out the light. Ava fumbled for a lamp, clicking it on. The room was frozen in time, a vanity table cluttered with perfumes, a dress laid out on the bed as if waiting for its owner to return. Ava moved toward the desk near the window. Papers were scattered across it, maps, mostly. Maps of Thornwood territory. Her heart hammered in her ears. Why was the Luna of Blackstone obsessed with a failing pack? Her fingers brushed against a leather-bound journal tucked under a stack of maps. She opened it to the last entry. The date was scrawled at the top the day Isabella died. I found her, the child from the picture, Ava Thornwood. She has been hidden in plain sight all this time. The bloodline didn't end with Elena. I have to get to her before the others do. Dominic is too stubborn. He tries to protect me by keeping me in the dark, but he needs to know the truth. I'm going to bring her home tonight. The book fell from Ava's numb fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Isabella was coming for me. The realization was a physical blow. The accident wasn't random. Isabella died because she was trying to find Ava, Dominic had said. You owe me a life. He didn't mean a financial debt. He meant that his wife had died trying to save her. What do you think you are doing? The voice was a low, guttural snarl that seemed to vibrate the floorboards. Ava spun around. Dominic stood in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the top, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. But it was his face that terrified her. His eyes were glowing, not gray, not steel. They were bright, molten amber, the eyes of a wolf on the brink of shifting. Dominic, Ava stammered, backing up until her hips hit the desk. I just wanted to understand. You have no right, Dominic roared. He crossed the room in a blur of motion that was too fast for a human to track. One moment he was at the door, the next he was pressing her against the edge of the desk. His hands slammed down on either side of her, trapping her. His breathing was ragged, harsh. I told you this place was forbidden, he growled, lowering his face until his nose was inches from hers. Do you have a death wish, Ava? I found the diary, Ava whispered, her voice shaking but her chin held high. She refused to cower. She was coming for me, Dominic. Why did she want me? Dominic flinched. The pain that crossed his face was raw and unguarded. Silence! Tell me, Ava shouted back, pushing against his chest. The contact seemed to snap something inside him. Dominic grabbed her wrists, pinning them to the desk. His grip was iron, but his body was burning up. He was radiating heat like a furnace. He buried his face in the crook of her neck. Ava froze. She expected him to bite, to tear her throat out. Instead, he inhaled, a long, deep, shuddering breath. "Damn you." He groaned against her skin, the vibration sending a jolt of electricity straight to her core. "You smell like rain, like honeysuckle, like her." "Isabella?" Ava asked breathlessly, her heart racing so fast she might faint. "No." Dominic pulled back slightly, his amber eyes searching hers with a desperate, tortured intensity, like trouble. The air between them crackled. The anger in the room was shifting, twisting into something else. Lust, thick, heavy, and suffocating. Dominic looked at her mouth, his pupils dilated. Ava felt a pull in her gut, a magnetic force that wanted to bridge the gap between them. Her body softened against his, her breathing matching his ragged rhythm. She wanted him to kiss her. God help her. She wanted this monster to claim her. Dominic leaned in, his lips brushing hers, a feather-light touch that promised ruin. "I should hate you," he whispered against her mouth. "Every time I look at you, I remember what I lost." "Then let me go," Ava whispered back, her eyes fluttering shut. "I can't." His hand moved from the desk to her waist, his fingers digging into her hips, pulling her flush against him. The evidence of his desire was hard against her stomach. For a moment, the world narrowed down to the heat of his skin and the scent of cedar and musk. Then, a growl ripped from his throat, not of passion, but of warning. He shoved himself away from her as if she burned him. He stumbled back, his chest heaving, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. The amber in his eyes fought a war with the gray. "Get out," he rasped, turning his back to her. "Get out before I lose control." "Dominic, go." The roar shook the glass in the windows. Ava grabbed the diary and fled. She ran down the hallway, tears streaming down her face, her body still humming with the ghost of his touch. That night, sleep was a battlefield. Ava tossed and turned, the sheets tangling around her legs. She fell into a nightmare that felt more like a memory. She was small, running through a dark forest. Branches whipped her face, behind her. The sound of paws thundering on the earth, howls that curdled the blood, fire, the smell of smoke and burning flesh. "Run." "Ava, don't look back," a woman's voice, her mother. Ava tripped. The ground rushed up to meet her. She looked at her hands. They weren't hands. They were claws, sharp, black talons. Fur sprouted from her skin, silver and shimmering. Ava woke with a scream, sitting bolt upright in bed. Her chest was heaving, sweat soaking her nightgown. She scrambled out of bed and ran to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. She gripped the edges of the sink, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She froze. In the mirror, her eyes weren't their usual hazel. They were glowing, a bright, piercing yellow. And her fingernails. She looked down at her hands gripping the porcelain. Her nails had elongated, turning into hard, sharp points that scratched deep grooves into the sink. Ava screamed again, a sound of pure terror. She blinked, shaking her hands frantically. In an instant, the glow faded. Her nails returned to normal. The mirror showed just a terrified young woman with dark circles under her eyes. But the scratches on the sink remained. Ava stared at them, her mother's dying words echoing in the silence of the room. "You aren't like the other children." She wasn't human. She wasn't just a girl from a failing pack. She was something else, and Dominic Kane knew. The morning sun did nothing to dispel the chill that had settled deep in Ava's bones. She had barely slept, spending the remaining hours of darkness staring at her hands, waiting for the claws to return. They didn't. But the feeling of power, dormant and humming beneath her skin, hadn't left. She found Dominic in the main dining hall. He was seated at the head of the long oak table, reading a newspaper, a cup of black coffee steaming untouched beside him. He looked composed, the perfect image of an alpha, showing no sign of the near-feral breakdown he'd had in Isabella's room the day before. Ava marched in. The heavy doors slammed shut behind her, echoing like a gunshot. Dominic didn't look up. "Good morning, Ava." "Don't good morning me," she snapped, tossing the leather-bound diary onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and hit his coffee cup with a clink. "We are done with secrets. Dominic, start talking." Dominic slowly folded his newspaper. He looked at the diary, then up at her. His face was impassive, but his eyes were wary. "I see you kept the souvenir from your trespassing," he said coolly. "She was coming for me," Ava accused, her voice trembling with anger. "Isabella died because of me. That's why you hate me. That's why you look at me like I'm a ghost." "I don't hate you," Dominic said, his voice surprisingly soft. He stood up, walking around the table. "I resent the circumstance. There is a difference." "Explain it to me," Ava demanded. "Why did she think I needed saving? Why did my mother tell me to hide what I am?" Dominic stopped in front of her. "And what are you, Ava?" The question hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. I don't know," she whispered, her bravery faltering. "Last night, something happened to me, my eyes, my hands." Dominic's expression tightened. "It's starting sooner than I thought." "What is starting?" Before he could answer, the dining hall doors burst open again. Chloe Bennett strode in, followed by 2 other high-ranking pack members. She was dressed in leather training gear, looking fierce and predatory. "Alpha," she said, ignoring Ava completely. "The pack is gathering for the morning sparring session. Your presence is required." She glanced at Ava with a smirk. "Unless you're too busy babysitting the human." "Ava is my wife. Chloe, show respect," Dominic warned, though his tone was distracted. "Respect is earned, not married into." Chloe spat. She turned her malicious gaze on Ava. "Look at her. She's shaking. She reeks of fear. Aluna is supposed to be the mother of the pack, a warrior. She's nothing but a liability." Something inside Ava snapped. Maybe it was the lack of sleep. Maybe it was the confusion. Or maybe it was the strange, feral energy that had been waking up inside her since she set foot in Blackstone Manor. "I am standing right here," Ava said, her voice low and steady. She stepped out from behind the chair. "If you have something to say it to my face." Chloe laughed, a cruel barking sound. "Oh, the kitten has claws. Do you want me to say it to your face? Fine. You are weak, you are unworthy, and you are a stain on Isabella's memory." "Stop," Dominic commanded, stepping between them. "No," Ava said, pushing past Dominic. Her blood was boiling. It felt like hot oil was running through her veins. "Let her talk." "I challenge you," Chloe sneered. "Right now, the training grounds. Let's see if you can last 10 seconds without crying for your daddy." "Accepted," Ava said before she could think. "Ava, no." Dominic grabbed her arm. "You are human. She will kill you. A challenge cannot be stopped once accepted." Ava looked at Dominic for the first time. She saw genuine fear in his eyes. He wasn't worried about his reputation. He was worried about her. "Trust me," she whispered. She didn't know why she said it. She just felt ready. The training grounds were a muddy expanse of earth surrounded by towering pine trees. The entire Blackstone pack had gathered. Drawn by the scent of conflict, they formed a wide circle, whispering and jeering. Ava stood on one side, shivering in the cold wind. Chloe stood on the other, stretching her muscles, a sadistic grin on her face. "Rules are simple," Chloe called out. "No weapons, submission or knockout." Dominic stood on the sidelines, his body tense as a coiled spring. He looked ready to murder everyone present if a hair on Ava's head was harmed. "Begin," the enforcer shouted. Chloe didn't hesitate. She didn't shift into her wolf form that would be considered dishonorable against a human, but she moved with supernatural speed. She launched herself at Ava. a fist aimed straight for Ava's jaw. It should have connected. It should have shattered Ava's jawbone. But the world suddenly slowed down. To Ava, Chloe looked like she was moving through molasses. Ava saw the fist coming. She saw the shift in Chloe's weight. She heard the intake of breath. Duck. The command wasn't a thought. It was an instinct. Ava dropped. Chloe's fist sailed harmlessly over her head. The crowd gasped. Chloe stumbled, shocked. She spun around, snarling. Lucky move! She attacked again, a flurry of kicks and punches. Ava dodged, weaved, sidestepped. She wasn't thinking. Her body was moving on its own, fluid and precise. She could feel the earth beneath her feet, the wind changing direction, the heartbeat of her opponent. Strike! As Chloe overextended on a kick, Ava moved. She stepped inside Chloe's guard and drove her palm into Chloe's solar plexus. It wasn't a human hit. There was power behind it, raw, kinetic force. Chloe flew backward. She actually flew, lifting off the ground and landing 10 feet away in the mud with a wet thud. She gasped for air, unable to stand. Silence fell over the training grounds. Absolute, dead silence. Ava stood there, panting, staring at her hands. They were tingling again. Impossible, someone whispered. She's human. Chloe wheezed, scrambling to her feet, humiliated and enraged. Her eyes flashed gold. You bitch! With a roar, Chloe's body contorted, bones cracked and reshaped. In seconds, a large reddish-brown wolf stood in her place. She had shifted. Chloe, stand down, Dominic roared, rushing forward. But Chloe was gone, lost to the wolf's rage. She lunged at Ava, jaws snapping, aiming for the throat. Ava didn't run. She couldn't. A heat explosion went off in her chest. A sound ripped from her throat, not a scream, but a growl, a deep, resonant growl that matched the alpha timbre of Dominic's. Just as Chloe's teeth were about to graze her neck, a massive black blur slammed into the red wolf. Dominic. He had shifted midair, a colossal black wolf, twice the size of Chloe, pinned her to the ground. He snarled, his teeth inches from her throat, asserting dominance so violently that half the pack fell to their knees in submission. The red wolf whimpered, exposing her neck. It was over. Dominic shifted back to human form. Naked and furious, not caring about the crowd, he grabbed a cloak from a nearby guard and threw it around his waist, then stormed over to Ava. She was standing frozen, her eyes wide. Her eyes were glowing gold again. And this time, everyone saw it. Everyone leave, Dominic bellowed. Now! The pack scattered, terrified of their alpha's wrath. Dominic grabbed Ava's arm, dragging her away from the mud, toward the manor. You hurt me, she gasped, stumbling to keep up. He didn't stop until they were inside his private study. Slamming the door and locking it, he turned on her, his chest heaving. Do you have any idea what you just did? He shouted. You exposed yourself. I didn't do anything. I just defended myself, Ava yelled back. You saw her. She shifted. She tried to kill me. Because she sensed it. Dominic grabbed her shoulders, shaking her slightly. She sensed the threat. You aren't human. Ava. Then what am I? Ava screamed, tears finally spilling over. Tell me the truth. Dominic, my mother is dead. My father lied to me. Who am I? Dominic stared at her. The anger drained out of him, replaced by a profound weariness. He walked to a safe behind his desk, spun the dial, and pulled out an old, yellowed file. He tossed it onto the desk between them. Open it. Ava picked up the file. Inside was a birth certificate. Name Ava. Mother Elena Thornwood. Father unknown. But underneath was a pack registration form from 25 years ago. It was from the Blackstone pack. It had Elena's picture attached. Your mother was a wolf, Dominic said, his voice heavy. She was a member of this pack. She was a gamma, high-ranking. My mother was a wolf. Ava stared at the photo. But she never shifted. She never told me. She had her wolf bound, Dominic explained, by a witch, to hide her scent, to hide you. Why? Ava looked up at him. Why hide me? Because of your father, Dominic said softly. He walked around the desk, leaning against it, crossing his arms. Marcus Thornwood is not your biological father. He was a human who loved Elena enough to give her his name and hide her shame. Shame, Ava felt cold. I was a mistake. No. Dominic shook his head. He looked at her with an intensity that made her shiver. You weren't a mistake. Ava, you were a miracle and a target. Who was he? Ava whispered. My real father. Dominic looked away, staring out the window at the dark forest beyond. A man who should have been king, but he died before you were born. He turned back to her, his eyes dark with secrets. You are a hybrid, Ava, part human, part wolf, but not just any wolf. He stepped closer, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was gentle now, reverent. You have the blood of alphas in your veins. That's why your instincts are waking up, being here, on Blackstone land. It's calling to your blood. It's breaking the binding your mother put on you. Ava felt the room spinning. So that's why you married me, to bring me back to my pack. I married you to keep you alive, Dominic corrected. Because the people who killed your mother, the people who killed Isabella. He paused, his jaw clenching. They know you exist, and now that your wolf has woken up, they will be coming for you. Ava sank into the leather chair, clutching the file to her chest, her identity, her history. Everything she knew was a lie. So what do we do? She asked, her voice small. Dominic knelt before her for the first time. He didn't look like her captor. He looked like her guardian. We stop fighting each other, he said, placing his large, warm hands over hers, and we start preparing for war. The atmosphere at Blackstone Manor had shifted. The hostility that once greeted Ava in the corridors had been replaced by a wary, hushed curiosity. The pack knew she wasn't fully human anymore, and that made her dangerous. But to Dominic, she was something else entirely. She was a responsibility he was struggling to keep at arm's length. Over the next 2 weeks, the library became their sanctuary, and the training grounds their battlefield. Dominic took it upon himself to teach her. Breathe, Dominic instructed. They were in the private dojo located in the basement of the manor. It was late, the rest of the house asleep. The room was matted, dimly lit, smelling of old leather and exertion. Ava stood in the center of the mat, sweat causing her tank top to cling to her skin. Her chest heaved. I am breathing. No. Dominic circled her, his movement silent. He was barefoot, wearing only loose track pants. The sight of his bare, scarred chest was a distraction Ava was finding harder to ignore. You are panting. You are fighting the instinct. You treat the wolf inside you like a parasite. It is a part of you. Ava, embrace it. He stepped behind her, his chest brushing against her back. The heat radiating from him was instantaneous, enveloping her. Close your eyes, he whispered near her ear. Ava obeyed. In the darkness behind her lids, she could feel him, not just his physical presence, but his energy, a dark, swirling storm that pushed against her own senses. Reach for it. Dominic guided her. His hands came up to grip her waist, correcting her stance. His thumbs dug into her oblique muscles, firm and possessive. Feel the anger you hold, the fear, the desire. Give it a shape. Ava focused. She thought of the way Chloe had looked at her. She thought of her father lying in the hospital. She thought of the way Dominic's hands felt on her skin right now. A low vibration started in her chest. Her senses sharpened. She could hear the hum of the electricity in the walls. She could smell the soap on Dominic's skin. beneath the musk and sweat. Good, Dominic murmured, his voice dropping an octave. Now, turn that power outward. Ava spun around, moving faster than she intended. She aimed a strike at Dominic's chest. He caught her wrist effortlessly, but the impact echoed through the room with a sharp crack. He didn't let go. He pulled her in, twisting her arm behind her back, pinning her body against his. It wasn't painful, but it was trapping. "You're strong," he noted, his eyes scanning her face. They were close, intimately close. Ava could see the flecks of gold swirling in his steel-gray irises. "I have a good teacher," she breathed, looking up at him. The lesson was forgotten. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a tension that had been building since their wedding day. Dominic's gaze dropped to her lips. His nostrils flared, inhaling her scent. "You are making this very difficult, Ava," he rasped. "What am I doing?" she whispered. "Existing," he groaned. "You smell like salvation. Do you have any idea what that does to a man who has lived in the dark for so long?" He released her arm, but he didn't step back. His hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. The touch was reverence, mixed with a desperate hunger. "Dominic." "I shouldn't," he muttered, as if arguing with himself. "I promised myself I wouldn't touch you, that I would keep this professional." "To hell with professional," Ava said, her boldness surprising even herself. The wolf inside her purred, urging her forward. She rose on her tiptoes, her hands resting on his broad chest, feeling the frantic thud of his heart beneath the scars. Dominic's resolve shattered. He crushed his mouth to hers. This wasn't like the wedding kiss, though. That had been for show. This was raw. This was starving. He devoured her, his tongue sweeping into her mouth, claiming her with a primitive intensity that made her knees buckle. Ava moaned, threading her fingers into his thick, dark hair, pulling him closer. Dominic lifted her easily. Wrapping her legs around his waist, he walked them backward until Ava's back hit the padded wall. He pressed into her, the hard ridge of his desire undeniable against her softness. For a moment, there was nothing but the heat, the taste of him, the feeling of finally belonging somewhere. Then, the dojo door creaked open. "Alpha." The voice was like a bucket of ice water. Dominic froze. He tore his mouth from Ava's, dropping her legs so her feet hit the mat. He spun around, shielding her body with his own, a feral snarl ripping from his throat. Elder Morrison stood in the doorway, his wrinkled face twisted in a mask of shock and disapproval. Beside him stood two pack enforcers. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" Dominic roared, his eyes glowing bright amber. "Forgive me, Alpha," Morrison said, though his tone was anything but apologetic. "But we found something during a routine sweep of the Luna's quarters. We felt it could not wait." Dominic's body went rigid. He glanced back at Ava, then straightened up, pulling his mask of indifference back into place. "Speak!" Morrison held up a piece of paper. It was crumpled, as if it had been hastily hidden. "We found this taped under the drawer of the Luna's vanity," Morrison said. He walked forward and handed the paper to Dominic. Dominic read it. The silence that followed was terrifying. Ava stepped out from behind him. "What is it?" Dominic looked at her. The heat in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, deadly void. He handed her the letter. Ava took it. The handwriting was jagged, unfamiliar. "Target acquired. The merger is complete. Dominic suspects nothing. I will disable the perimeter defenses on the night of the blood moon. Phase 2 of the destruction of Blackstone begins. A." Ava stared at the paper. "I didn't write this." "It was found in your room, Ava," Morrison said smugly. "Signed with your initial. We always suspected the Thornwood merger was a trap. Your father sells you to us. You infiltrate our home, and then you open the gates for our enemies." "No!" Ava looked at Dominic, panic rising in her chest. Dominic, you can't believe this. I've been with you. I've been training. Dominic stood perfectly still. He looked at the letter, then at Ava. His jaw worked, the muscles ticking. The handwriting is not hers, Dominic said quietly. She could have disguised it. Morrison argued. She is a spy, Alpha. Her mother was a traitor who ran away. The apple does not fall far from the tree. She must be confined until we can interrogate her. I am his wife, Ava shouted. You are a stranger, Morrison snapped back. Alpha, the pack's safety comes first. You cannot let your luscus cloud your judgment. Dominic closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, they were hard. Take her to the tower room, Dominic ordered. Ava felt as if he had punched her. Dominic! He didn't look at her. He turned his back. Lock her in. Place a guard at the door. No one enters or leaves until I have conducted a full investigation. Dominic, please. Ava reached for him, but the enforcers grabbed her arms. Don't touch him, traitor. One of the guards sneered. They dragged her out of the dojo. Ava looked back one last time. Dominic was standing alone in the center of the mat, staring at the wall, his hands clenched into fists so tight that blood dripped from his palms. He hadn't defended her. He had chosen the pack. And Ava's heart, which had just begun to beat for him, cracked right down the middle. The tower room was cold, high up in the oldest turret of the manor. There was no glass in the narrow slit window, only iron bars that let the biting wind howl through. Ava sat huddled in the corner, wrapped in a thin blanket, watching the moon rise. 2 days. She had been in here for 2 days. No one had come. Not Dominic, not Ryan. Only a silent guard who slid a tray of food through the slot at the bottom of the door and left. The betrayal burned hotter than the cold. She had let her guard down. She had let herself feel for Dominic. And the moment it mattered, he had locked her away. But he didn't look convinced. A small voice in her head whispered, He didn't throw you in the dungeon. He put you in the tower. It's the safest room in the castle. Thinking too loud, Luna. Ava jumped. The voice came from the window. Hanging on the outside of the bars, suspended by climbing gear, was Ryan Fletcher? Ryan? Ava scrambled to the window. Are you crazy? It's a 100-foot drop. I prefer adventurous. Ryan grinned, though his face was pale. He slipped a small screwdriver through the bars. Keep your voice down. The guard is asleep, but his hearing is still sharp. Help me undo these bolts. Together, they worked frantically. The rusty bolts groaned, but finally, the grate swung open. Ryan shimmied into the room. Dominic knows, Ryan whispered hurriedly. Before Ava could ask, he couldn't act in front of Morrison. The council is watching him like a hawk. If he showed bias toward a suspected spy, they'd strip him of his alpha status. Ava felt a wave of relief so strong she nearly collapsed. He believes me. He knows you didn't write it. Ryan nodded. He sent me to get you out. We tracked the paper scent. It had a trace of perfume on it. Very expensive, very distinct perfume. Chloe, Ava hissed. Bingo, Ryan confirmed. But it's worse than just jealousy. Ava, Dominic had me tail her, tonight. She's meeting someone in the Whispering Woods. Someone from outside the pack. We have to go, Ava said, moving toward the door. Not that way. Ryan pointed to the window. We go the way I came. The descent was terrifying, but Ava's newfound strength made it easier. Her grip was sure, her movements fluid. They reached the ground and sprinted toward the forest line, merging with the shadows. The Whispering Woods lived up to their name. The wind moved through the pine needles with a sound like hushed voices. Ryan led the way, tracking Chloe's scent. They found her in a clearing near the river that marked the border. Chloe was pacing back and forth, looking anxious. A moment later, a figure emerged from the opposite side of the riverbank. He was a man of average height, but his presence was oily, suffocating. He wore a long coat and a silver ring that glinted in the moonlight. "You're late," Chloe snapped. "And you are impatient," the man replied. His voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly chilling. "I did what you asked," Chloe said, her voice trembling. "I planted the note. They locked her up. Dominic is furious. Now give me the antidote." Ava froze behind the tree line. Antidote. "Ah, yes." The man smiled. "The poison I gave your mother. How is she doing, still coughing up blood?" "You promised," Chloe cried. "If I framed Ava, you would save my mother." "I lied," the man said simply. Chloe screamed, lunging for him, but the man moved with blinding speed. He caught her by the throat and lifted her off the ground. "You were a useful tool, Chloe, but phase 2 is starting. I don't need loose ends." "Let her go, Nathan." A deep voice rumbled from the darkness. Dominic stepped out from the shadows behind the clearing. He was fully dressed in tactical gear, looking like the god of war. The man Nathan dropped Chloe. She fell to the ground, gasping. "Alpha Cain." Nathan smiled, spreading his arms. "So nice of you to join us. I assume you brought the girl." "She isn't here," Dominic lied smoothly. "She is in a cell where she belongs." "Is she—" Nathan tilted his head, sniffing the air. "I don't think so. I smell vanilla and fear. Come out, little Ava. Come say hello to your mother's old friend." Ava's heart stopped. She looked at Ryan, who nodded. There was no point hiding. She stepped into the clearing, standing beside Dominic. He didn't look at her, but his hand brushed hers, a silent reassurance. "Nathan Cross," Dominic said, his voice dripping with venom. "Alpha of the Silver Moon Pack. I should have known it was you. You've been trying to destabilize Blackstone for years." "Destabilize Gnome," Nathan laughed. "I'm trying to purify it. Do you know who that girl is, Dominic? Or did your precious Isabella die before she could tell you the whole truth?" "I know enough," Dominic growled. "I know you killed Elena. I know you rigged Isabella's car." Isabella was nosy. Nathan shrugged. "She found the old records. She figured out that Elena didn't just run away. She ran away from me." Nathan's eyes fixed on Ava, dark and obsessed. "I loved your mother, Ava. I offered her everything. I was going to be an alpha. But she chose him. She chose that arrogant, weak human, or so I thought." Nathan sneered. "But she didn't choose a human, did she? She chose Lucian." Dominic stiffened. "Don't speak his name." "Lucian Cain," Nathan continued, ignoring Dominic. "Your big brother, the golden boy of Blackstone, the one who was supposed to be Alpha before he tragically died in a rogue ambush." Ava looked at Dominic. His face was a mask of agony. "Lucian is my father," Ava whispered. "Yes," Nathan spat. "Elena and Lucian, the Romeo and Juliet of the wolf world, a high-born alpha and a low-born gamma. Forbidden, disgusting. When I found out she was pregnant with his bastard, I killed Lucian. I made it look like rogues." "You," Dominic's voice broke, "you killed my brother." "He stood in my way," Nathan roared, "and then Elena ran. She married that human, Thornwood, to hide you. She bound your wolf. She thought she was safe, but I found her. I killed her too, and now I'm going to finish the job." Nathan whistled. Suddenly, the woods around them erupted with movement. Dozens of wolves, Silver Moon warriors, stepped out from the trees. They were surrounded. "You have one chance, Dominic," Nathan said, pulling a long, jagged knife from his coat. It was made of silver. "Hand over the girl, I'll kill her quickly, then I'll leave Blackstone alone." Dominic stepped in front of Ava. He didn't shift. He just stood there, a wall of defiance. "You want her?" Dominic asked, his voice low and dangerous. "You'll have to tear through me to get to her." He turned his head slightly, his gray eyes locking onto Ava's. "I didn't marry you to pay a debt, Ava," he said, his voice carrying over the sound of growling wolves. And I didn't marry you for revenge. Isabella left me a letter. She told me who you were. She told me you were Lucian's daughter. My niece. My blood. Tears welled in Ava's eyes. Dominic. I brought you here to protect you, he said, his voice thickening with emotion. I tried to keep my distance. I tried to see you only as a duty, but I failed. He reached back, squeezing her hand hard. I didn't marry you for the past. I married you to keep you breathing, because somehow, in this mess, you became my future. Nathan laughed, a cruel, high-pitched sound. Touching, truly. Kill them both. The Silver Moon wolves sprang. Shift! Ava! Dominic roared, pushing her back as he exploded into his massive black wolf form. The battle for Blackstone had begun, and this time, Ava wasn't going to hide. She closed her eyes, reached into the deep, dark well of power inside her chest, and pulled. Let it out. A howl ripped from her throat, shattering the night air. It wasn't the howl of a human pretending, it was the call of an alpha. Ava's bones cracked, her body reshaped, and where the girl had stood, a sleek, magnificent silver wolf now snarled, ready to defend her mate. The clearing in the whispering woods had turned into a cauldron of violence. Snarls, snapping jaws, and the sickening crunch of bone filled the night air. Ava, now a sleek silver wolf, moved like liquid moonlight. The transformation had been agony, but the power coursing through her was intoxicating. Her senses were dialed up to an excruciating degree. She could smell the fear radiating from the Silver Moon wolves, hear the heartbeat of every creature in the vicinity. She wasn't just fighting, she was dancing. A large gray wolf lunged at her flank. Ava didn't just dodge, she anticipated. She dropped low, letting him sail over her, then spun and snapped her jaws onto his hind leg. He yelped and retreated. She wasn't as large as the males, but she was faster, much faster. Across the clearing, Dominic was a whirlwind of black fur and fury. He was fighting 3 wolves at once, his massive size giving him the advantage. He swiped a paw, sending one wolf flying into a tree, and crushed the throat of another with a single, brutal bite. But there were too many of them. Nathan had brought an army. Ryan and the Blackstone warriors had arrived moments after the first howl, joining the fray, but they were outnumbered 2-1. Even Chloe, injured and human, was fighting on the perimeter, using a fallen branch as a club, driven by desperation and guilt. Then, a piercing whistle cut through the chaos. The Silver Moon wolves fell back, forming a circle. In the center stood Nathan. He hadn't shifted. He stood calm and arrogant amidst the carnage, holding the jagged silver knife. "Enough," Nathan shouted. "I grow bored of this brawling. Dominic, I invoke the right of kings." The battlefield went silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Dominic, panting heavily, shifted back to human form. He was bleeding from a gash on his shoulder, naked but unashamed, radiating lethal intent. "The right is for alphas only," Dominic growled, stepping forward. "You are a murderer, Nathan. You have no honor." "I am an alpha," Nathan spat, "and I challenge you for the right to this territory and the life of the girl. Single combat, to the death. Winner takes all." "No." Ava shifted back. The pain was sharp but fleeting. She scrambled to Dominic's side, grabbing his arm. "Don't do it, Dominic. It's a trap. He has a weapon." "If I refuse, my pack will be slaughtered," Dominic said, his eyes never leaving Nathan. "I accept." The circle tightened. Ava was pushed back by the Blackstone warriors. She watched, her heart hammering against her ribs, as the 2 men circled each other. Nathan didn't fight fair. He feinted with the knife, slashing at Dominic's chest. Dominic dodged, but the silver blade grazed his skin, leaving a sizzling, black burn. "Silver," Dominic hissed through gritted teeth. "Takes the edge off your healing, doesn't it?" Nathan sneered. They clashed again. Dominic was stronger, landing a heavy blow to Nathan's jaw that sent him stumbling. But Nathan was quick and dirty. He threw a handful of dirt into Dominic's eyes, blinding him momentarily, then plunged the knife into Dominic's side. Ava screamed. Dominic roared. Dropping to one knee, the silver poison was spreading fast, turning his veins black. "Look at you," Nathan laughed, standing over him. The mighty Dominic Kane, dying just like his brother. He raised the knife for the killing blow. "Say hello to Lucian for me." Ava didn't think. She didn't weigh the odds. She broke through the line of warriors. She didn't shift fully, there wasn't time. Instead, she let the wolf lend her its speed. She slammed into Nathan just as he brought the knife down. The impact knocked him off balance. The knife skittered away into the grass. "You little bitch," Nathan snarled, backhanding her across the face. Ava flew backward, tasting blood, but she scrambled up instantly, standing between Nathan and Dominic. "You want to kill him," Ava panted, wiping her mouth. Her eyes were blazing, one gold, one silver. "You go through me." Nathan laughed. "With pleasure, I killed your mother, I killed your father. Ending you will be the family reunion I've been waiting for." He lunged for her, his hands shifting into claws. Ava braced herself, but suddenly, a hand grabbed her ankle. "Together," Dominic rasped. He dragged himself up, swaying, his side bleeding heavily. He stood beside her, his hand gripping hers. His touch sent a surge of energy through her, warm and grounding. "Together," Ava repeated. They moved as one. Ava went low, sweeping Nathan's legs. Dominic went high, a devastating haymaker that connected with a sickening crack against Nathan's skull. Nathan crumpled. But he wasn't done. With a roar of pure insanity, he shifted. His wolf was hideous matted, gray fur, foaming at the mouth. He sprang from the ground, aiming for Ava's throat. Dominic caught him mid-air. In wolf form, Dominic slammed Nathan into the ground, but Nathan was fighting with the strength of madness. He rolled, pinning Dominic, his jaws snapping inches from Dominic's face. Ava saw the silver knife gleaming in the grass. She grabbed it. The silver burned her palm, searing her flesh, but she ignored the pain. She leaped onto Nathan's back. With a scream of fury, she drove the knife down into the base of Nathan's neck. Nathan convulsed. A gargled howl died in his throat. He collapsed heavily on top of Dominic, then went still. Silence descended on the clearing. Ava rolled off, gasping, clutching her burned hand. Dominic shoved Nathan's body aside. He shifted back, staggering toward Ava. He fell to his knees beside her, pulling her into his arms. "Ava," he choked out, checking her face, her hands. "You foolish, brave girl." "Is it over?" she whispered, leaning against his chest. The Silver Moon wolves, seeing their alpha dead, dropped to their knees, baring their necks in submission. "It's over," Dominic said, resting his forehead against hers. "It's finally over." As the sun began to rise over the whispering woods, painting the bloody battlefield in soft pink light, Dominic looked at Ava. But the look in his eyes was strange. It was love, yes, but it was also grief. "What is it?" Ava asked, sensing his shift in mood. "You look so much like him," Dominic whispered, touching her face. "When you fought, I saw Lucian. I saw my brother." Ava's heart clenched. "Is that all you see?" Dominic didn't answer immediately. He looked at the sunrise, then back at her. "I don't know," he admitted, his honesty brutal, "but I intend to find out." 6 months later. The seasons had turned. The biting cold of winter had melted into a lush, vibrant spring. Blackstone Manor was no longer a tomb. It was alive. Windows were open, letting in the fresh air. The gardens, once neglected, were blooming with wildflowers. Ava stood on the balcony of the master suite, looking out over the packlands. Her hand rested subconsciously on her stomach, where a tiny new life was just beginning to grow. She was the Luna now, officially. The pack revered her not just because she was Lucian Kane's daughter, a true alpha by blood, but because she had fought for them. She had bled for them. The door behind her opened. "You're supposed to be resting," Dominic's voice chided gently. Ava turned. He looked different these days. The lines of stress around his eyes had smoothed out. He smiled more. "I'm pregnant, Dominic, not invalid," Ava teased, walking over to him. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. "How are you feeling?" he asked, placing a large hand over her belly. "Like I could run a marathon." Ava laughed. "Your pup is already restless." "Our pup," Dominic corrected. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. "I visited the graves today," Ava said softly. Dominic stiffened slightly, but he didn't pull away. He had built a new memorial in the family cemetery. 3 stones stood side by side Lucian Kane, Elena Thornwood, and Isabella Kane. "And?" Dominic asked. "And I said thank you," Ava said, "to all of them." She looked up at him. "Do you still see him when you look at me?" It was the question that had hung between them for months. Dominic had struggled with it. The guilt of loving his brother's daughter, of replacing his brother's memory. Dominic cupped her face, his thumbs tracing her jawline. "I see Lucian in your courage," he admitted. "I see Elena in your kindness. But when I look at you, Ava, I see you." He kissed her, deep and slow, a promise sealed in breath and soul. "I see the woman who saved me," he murmured against her lips. "I see the mother of my child. I see my mate." "Mate?" Ava raised an eyebrow. "We never did the ceremony properly, the bond. I never felt the click everyone talks about." "Because you were blocking it," Dominic said, "and I was denying it." He stepped back, extending his hand. "Come with me." He led her down to the edge of the forest, to a small clearing bathed in moonlight. It was where they had first run together as wolves after the battle. "Ava Thornwood," Dominic said, his voice solemn. "Daughter of Lucian and Elena. Will you accept me, Dominic Kane, not as a contract, not as a guardian, but as your true mate, to lead this pack by my side, equal in all things?" Ava looked at him, the monster she had feared, the stranger she had married, the hero she loved. "I accept," she whispered. Dominic lowered his head to the crook of her neck. This time, there was no hesitation. He bit down. The pain was sharp, electric, but it was immediately followed by a rush of euphoria so intense Ava gasped. She felt a golden thread snap into place in her soul, connecting her to him, mind and body. She could feel his love, his devotion, his fierce protectiveness flooding into her. Ava bit him back, marking him as hers. As they pulled apart, breathless, Ava's eyes glowed a brilliant silver, and Dominic's a deep amber. "I love you," Dominic said, the words rough and real. "I love you too," Ava replied. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled a sound of joy, of victory. And as they stood there under the watchful gaze of the moon, Ava knew that the contract was finally fulfilled, not the one signed with ink on paper, but the one written in the stars long before she was born. She was home,